It's been 525 days since the terror began and 495 since we've last seen or heard from anyone. And well over a year since our last broadcast. Today, once again, we are live. I am Maxwell, and you are finally back in the bunker. Hit it, Vic. If you can hear this, you don't need an update. You've seen it, like us, and you survived it. Before we, like the rest of the world, were forced by events beyond all control or imagining to shut down, many of you reached out. You still sent us your stories. You expressed your concern for me and Vicky. I'm good and goddamn grateful to report that in spite of this all, we are fine. We are here. The bunker is secured. The solar panels are exceeding our expectations, and we siphoned off enough gas to keep these jennies pumping out the juice longer than we will ever need. Our garden's growing, and the scavenging continues to yield results, though, to be honest, we never stay out for long. The world outside of our small town, has grown much smaller. All of my maps now end at the distance I can walk or motorbike to and get back to the bunker before nightfall. For months, the dead animals were everywhere. The dogs still tethered to the leashes, sat decomposing on sidewalks and yards. Got cats stiff with the death, littered in all the alleyways and every broad open space. It just seems like a killing field for birds, as though entire flocks had just dropped out of the sky all at once, as if flight, like so much of the old days, it was just simply no longer. But the insects persist. Their time now, I suppose, as we had ours, the dinosaurs theirs. They've cleaned up most of it, thank God for that. Mostly what's left are the bones, scattered by wind and the rain and floods. They paper the earth like propaganda, dropped from enemy planes. Messages written in a language none of us can understand or read. Now, vegetation reigns. Our concrete buildings, they turn to temples for weeds and vines and trees. Nature encroaches, and the city grows smaller, quieter. The only sound I hear are crickets and cicadas, and the rushing of the Pine Ridge Creek 2 miles away. I've lived here most of my life and never been able to hear those waters anywhere but on its banks. But we've survived. And I have to believe that some of you have too. And it's up to us and to you to rebuild, to persist. And that's why we're broadcasting a small, but it's defiant return to normalcy, to the past. So now we invite anyone within the sound of my voice to come back to the bunker. The same one you've known for 14 years of national syndication. And that we pray you'll know for 14 or more moving forward. Since the beginning, callers have been this show's backbone. And we've tried to be a place for you to report your real-life experiences on the fringes of the known world. You know, the ghosts and the lore, the UFOs, the cryptids, all the rare and visceral encounters that most of the world, well, they always laughed at you for. Well, look at most of the world now, huh? We won't have callers, but we do have a backlog of emails sent both in the days leading up to the terror and in the days following, before the power grids, like the like the walls of Jericho, all came tumbling down. Now is the time for those voices, your voices, to be heard once more. We decided to call these harrowing dispatches, and for lack of a more poetic term, letters from the terror. So tonight, for our celebratory relaunch, we bring you the first such letter. It comes from Keith G. He's an English professor in Ohio, sent during the earliest days of the terror. It details not only the shock, the numbness that we all endured those grim dark days, but also the effects wrought within our homes and, more importantly, our minds. Please lend a respectful ear to our first letter of a new day, which I've taken the liberty of titling La Pesadilla de los Chinos. Dear Maxwell, I've been a listener of yours for about 10 years, though I hesitate to call myself a fan. I've never called or written and don't believe much, if any, of what I've heard on your show. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or an alien abductee. I'm not a ghost hunter or a clairvoyant, but I am a chronic insomniac. And on those long nights when it felt like neither sleep nor daylight would ever come again, your show has been a comfort, a chorus of dark lullabies sung through AM static. Now, with all that's happened, it seems I finally have my own song to sing. It started last month. Scatter anew reports by turns ridiculous and horrific. The farmhouse in Perth cocooned by wolf spiders. The alligator boom of alligator babies born of Florida women. The shocking phantasmagoria of the Burchest blood cult. After the global quarantine protocols went into effect, after we brought in all the supplies we could carry, after I made calls to my widowed, terrified mother, worried that each would be the last, I spent most of that time in front of the TV with Philippe, my roommate. We had been part-time faculty at Sherwood College, a small liberal arts college nestled in the rolling foothills of Ohio's Gannadouche County. I was a hometown boy and adjunct professor for the English department, who secretly wanted to write historical novels of the state's pioneering days. He was an instructor in computer science from Barranquilla, Colombia, who wanted to design video games. My problem was that no one gives a shit about Ohio's history. Philippe's problem was snakes. It was the day when the Ted Williams Tunnel collapsed in Boston when Felipe showed me his latest game. His last game. We were watching TV when dozens of people, arms linked in ranks as neat as German soldiers, walked through traffic and into the tunnel's westbound entrance moments before it collapsed. You remember Cayenne Murphy? He was the sole heir to the Murphy's Bacon empire who turned investigative journalist after a fire killed 22 employees in Limerick. He was the reporter on site. He's sweating profusely, as though it were July and not a rainy day in late September. As he updated casualty estimates and proffered baseless explanations, he kept dabbing his cheeks and forehead with the sleeve of his sports jacket. We watched, rapt, as his hands suddenly turned orange as embers, and then his neck and his face, and he stopped talking, his mouth locked open in a silent scream, and suddenly burst into a geyser of flame. Felipe looked unfazed and stood. Come, I need to show you something. He was a small, slight man with a lilting accent and subtle lisp, but there was a note of command in his voice that led me to follow him upstairs. I've been in his room only a handful of times, and only then to see his games. They were all pretty much the same, first-person shooter deals, where you walk through the sewage tunnels or the Amazonian hellscape of the hallways of an abandoned insane asylum, blasting cartoonishly large snakes with a thundering blunderbuss. I'm no gamer, but they all had looked pretty slick to me, professional. But by Philippe's standards, though, they were utter failures. This one. He stood up, guiding me to his chair like an overly solicitous maitre d'. This game was different. Bizarre. It looked like something made for kids. Two blocky figures, overalls, and a summer dress, sharing a baby watering can, tended a square of greens and reds. The music was for a kid's game too. Synth chords and the airy plunk of a xylophone. Felipe picked up the controller and pressed some buttons. And suddenly, a snake unlike any I'd ever seen, brightly colored in technicolor blacks, reds, and yellows, slithered onto the screen. The hell is that? Rabot de Agi, the coral snake. Felipe, balancing on one foot, brought his other leg up and scratched absently at his shin. Venimas. It was hyper realistic. An inchworm of live footage stitched into a crayon universe. Its movements were swift, lethal, like it had crawled out of the screen into our world. It was followed by a second, a third, eventually a dozen. And the snakes circled and attacked the childlike figures. They bit, tearing away pixels of peach flesh, savaging the bodies, more like wolves at feeding than any snake I've ever seen. Jesus, Philippe, what the hell's the point of He raised a finger to his lips, hushing me. Shh. From his speaker came screams. Real human screams. Scores of overdubbed voices, male and female, infant and adult, all shrieking in agony. Those little pink faces, all the more terrifying for their lack of features and expression. The little bodies, they spasmed beneath the snakes that continued to bite and tear. That goddamn music still playing in the background, light and fancy free. And at last, the screen filled with a blur of blacks and reds with bands of yellow, and as if the snakes were devouring the screen. My baby, he said. La pesadilla de los chinos. Okay, it had been 15 years or so since my 3 semesters of undergrad Spanish, but I tried, okay? The nightmare of the Chinese? Without answering, Felipe picked up the controller, pressed a few buttons, and put a merciful end to the din of human screams. The game reset to the blocky boy and girl, smiling over their watering can on the green grass beneath a lemony, cheery sun. I see this all the time, he said, closing the laptop. He rubbed the lid with his hands in slow circular motions. La pesadilla del Filipito. I try to hide inside the computer. You know? Did it work? It was a stupid question. Felipe left me alone with it as he slinked out of the room, down the stairs. That night, while I lay in bed without the faintest hope of sleep, I heard Felipe scream. I threw off the covers and ran barefoot up the stairs. At the end of the hallway, I saw the light fill in the crack beneath the door. I heard the objects, the books and the glass and whatever computer parts were in there, hurled against the walls. Furniture knocked to the ground. When I threw open the door, I saw Felipe standing on his bed with a tennis racket held over his head. On his hardwood floor writhed the brightest colored snake I have ever seen. Black and orangish red with yellow bands, a diamond-shaped head, black and shiny as coal. It moved. Oh my God. I can't describe the way it moved. Like it was on top of water or ice, a rainbow S turning itself inside and out, right side, inside, out, over and over, fast as a hummingbird's wings. It looked as overly real there in our apartment as the game snake had in the cartoonish world around it. It looked like something from a world with more dimensions than our own. Metello! He screamed, tossing me the racket. Kill him! Kill him! I spun the racket sideways and brought it down like a pickaxe, again and again and again, and my eyes shut tight. I opened them just in time to see the 6 or 8 halves of snake instantly regenerate into whole ones, intact, from fang to tail. I slowly backed away, one step at a time, until I felt something squirmed beneath my foot, something muscled and wrapped in greasy leather. I shrieked and jumped at the brightly colored snake slithered forward. Others spilled into the room from the hallway. Snakes poured from the ceiling vents, a gushing, multicolored waterfall. Snakes clung to the wall, streamed like a laser light show through the crack beneath his closet door. One dangled from a blade at the slowly spinning ceiling fan. His entire room a kaleidoscope of fucking horror. Keith. Felipe looked at me. His face was just a study in hopelessness. He leaned in the corner of his walls and slid down on his bed. There was a wheezing sort of cry escaping him as his snakes mounted his bed. They covered him from feet to legs, pelvis to sternum. Felipe was drowning in a rising tide of literal living Harlequin paint. They arched and they struck. Over and over and over. Waves of lingering, pulsating bites as they filled him with their venom. His body spasmed once, then released a last long sigh, and as his final breath escaped him, I watched as the snakes lose color and blacks and reds and yellows, fading to grays and white. They begin losing shape, definition, each melting into each other, until at last they all dissolve into a layer of ash that smelled like baby powder and rotting meat.
"911? 911? What's your emergency?"
In the hours after his death, I tried to clean Felipe's room. Fool's errand. But I couldn't stand the rotting talcum smell that filled our apartment. After dumping most of the ash out of his window, I was left with the deal with the body. Calling 911 had just been an instinct. Stupid and likely futile, but I let it ring and ring until at last someone answered. "Hello!" I shouted. "Hello, yes, I am here. I am here. I am here."
911, what is your emergency?"
I pressed my phone to my ear, breathing heavily. My roommate, he's dead. He was bitten, snake poisonous. I need someone to take care of the remains.
"Sir, are you certain your roommate is deceased?"
What?
"Are you sure he's actually dead? You see,"
The dispatcher said, quieting her voice to a conspiratorial whisper.
"I thought everyone here was dead. Shot all those motherfuckers right at their stations, but they ain't. Sure, they look dead, but whenever I look away, I seen them out of the corner of my eye. They come closer, just a little more every day. They think they're gonna get my country ass, but I got a whole lot of more butts for them. You hear me?"
She screamed so loud I jerked the phone away from my ear.
"I got some loving for you right here, motherfuckers. Come get your love. Come get it."
I disconnected from the call. Sat down on the bed next to Felipe's corpse. We have a shed in our backyard. Not much in it, but equipment for landscaping and minor repairs, a lawnmower, rake, ladder, hand tools mounted, pegboards, paint trays, brushes, jerry cans, caulking gun, blah, blah, blah. And in the back, covered with spider webs and a half full of potting soil, I discovered a wheelbarrow. I would like to say I got Felipe down the stairs with all due pomp and respect, but as a one-man job, it proved to be a rather indelicate procedure. Suffice it to say that I ended up dragging him by the heels, his head pounding a slow cadence, one riser at a time. Our apartment is on a steeply inclined road near the top of a hill thick with maple and birch. It's where a swiftly rushing creek wends its dark and muddy way down the Ohio River. I hadn't been outside for days, and it felt so strange to walk beneath the gray sky. Aside from a faint whiff of wood smoke and leaves crunching in underneath my boots, and my own labored breathing, the world was utterly still. I entered a wood absent of squirrels, frogs, and birdsong, struggling to keep the wheelbarrow aright as I rolled Felipe over underbrush and tree roots all the way to 12 Pole Creek. I tried to dump him straight out over the front, but it was just pointless. I couldn't lift the handles high enough. I pivoted sideways and let the barrow roll over. Felipe tumbled, unfurling his sheet to reveal his still wide-eyed, terror-stricken face. but he stopped a good 6 feet short of the water. Tried to drag him, roll his with my feet, and ended up on my hands and knees, putting my shoulder into him. I counted, it was like eight fish, 6 catfish, and 2 gray carp float by, belly up before I got Felipe in the water. He floated out towards the center, carried by a strong current that rolled him over once before he disappeared around the bend. I don't remember doing so, but it seems a stopwatch running some 156 hours ago. I don't remember doing so, but it seems I set a stopwatch about 156 hours ago, but neither sleep nor daylight has come. My motor skills are slipping. I began typing this paragraph at 8 in the morning. At some point, a jolt of terror when I was convinced I was late for my modern European novel class. I tried to get out of bed, but my legs weren't there. I collapsed on the floor. I think I pissed myself. My room smells like baby powder and rotting meat. That's impossible. Surely I must have, maybe slept right through the day or 3? That's what I tell myself anyway. I don't really believe it. I remember another sleepless night, years and years, and maybe a lifetime ago, listening to Back in the Bunker, and you had a guest who claimed to be a former CIA or Shadow Ops or PsyOps or something, I can't remember. Project MK Ultra and sleep deprivation experiments, how some subjects, prisoners of war, political dissidents, junkies, prostitutes, orphans, whatever, forced awake longer than a week by chemicals and electrical shock. He talked about loss of balance and dexterity, emotional breakdowns, delirium, hallucinations, madness. Some, he said, resorted to autophagy, self-cannibalism. He claimed to have witnessed or conducted hundreds of experiments suggesting the government's interest went beyond torture, beyond even ESP or remote viewing or any other sci-fi theory. He said subjects kept awake for 10, 11 or more days didn't so much as hallucinate as experience waking dreams. An important distinction. He believed through sleeplessness the mind can actually rend a hole in the veil that separates our conscious reality from the dream world. He spoke about it in just those terms. A dream world. As if there exists some strange country, fantastical yet real, that we all visit. Not 7 billion products of 7 billion minds, but one land, a singular reality to which we travel on a nightly visa. Maxwell, what if all this shit that's happening now, all this terror, what if it's a corollary of that? What if that singular, cohesive dreamland has found a way to tear the veil and impose itself on our reality, on the collective consciousness of man? Crazy. I know. I'm just so tired. 198 hours? 8 days with no sun? No sleep. Trapped in an endless night without even the company of dreams. I'm sending this now. Maxwell. Maybe writing this is what's kept me up. Maybe in the dreamland things are better. Tell my mother I love her, Maxwell. I think she listens. Tell her Keith is in La Pasadilla de los Chinos. Tell her I've been trapped in the Chinese nightmare. But I'm almost free. Tell her I'm coming home. Thank you, Keith. Thank you for your bravery, not only for sharing such intimate, insane details, but in turning from someone who never believed the stories told here in the bunker to one willing to believe. Too many people came to too many untimely deaths from stubborn disbelief. There's a certain irony that those who once claimed so fiercely to seeing is believing should suddenly doubt their own eyes, their own ears and tongues, nerves, just because it didn't fit into their myopic worldview. But it is an irony that I cannot relish. The mind, Keith tells us, can actually rend a hole in the veil that separates our conscious reality from the dream world. It's no worse a theory than any of the others I've heard, or any I've dreamt of. In fact, what keeps me up at night, one of the many things, right, Vic, is the idea that of all the theories we've heard, the right one has been said. We've been exposed to it. The explanation, reality has been voiced, but how do we know which one? How to tell the one truth from the many best guesses and wrong turns and senseless detours? It's like religion, I suppose, or any metaphysics. It's one thing not to know. That's why Dante gave his hell's first layer. He was a soft touch when it came to pagans and the unbaptized, but to have heard the truth and not reckoned it. One last thing before we wrap up. Keith, if you can hear me, you were worried about misunderstanding Felipe, Descanse en paz, when he said La Pesadillo de los Chinos? You were right to have misgivings. Though the word Chinos does in many Spanish and Latin American dialects mean Chinese, it has a different meaning in Colombia. Your roommate, being from Barranquilla, had titled his last game The Children's Nightmare. Well, that's all for the first episode. And thank you to anyone, anywhere, at any time who has found us. However you can hear us, try to contact us through the same channel. And if you found us only to lose us, we broadcast. We hope to broadcast weekly. We're broadcasting audio live on the high frequency band, channel 58. We're also trying video. Shout out to the boys who remember amateur TV, channel 59. Throughout the rest of the week, Vicky's going to be spinning the dial up and down the radio frequency range, our blinking beacon. Maybe we'll see yours. NASA put gold-plated records on their Voyager probes before launching them into the abyss. Time capsules of sorts, letters sent without any hope of delivery. We're doing something similar here. I hope. Wow. We have hope. And that spirit, should anyone come to find the bunker abandoned, for any reason, or for the other, we're downloading each episode onto the USB drives, backup hard drives, and even the CD-ROMs. So for Vicky and me, thanks again for coming back to the bunker. You stay tuned for our next episode. Stay vigilant. Stay alive. And as always, amigos, trust in the Lord. Keep your motherfucking powder dry.